Welcome back. Comair may have been given the all-clear by the country's Civil Aviation Authority, but it's still suffering reputational damage from annoyed customers. People who are forced to buy tickets on other airlines or hire vehicles to get to their destinations are not happy about Kulula's offer to rebook them within 6 months. For more on this, I'm joined tonight by consumer journalist Wendy Knowler. Wendy, good evening. Welcome to News at Prime. So have Kulula customers basically been given the raw deal here?
That's the question of the week, They say it's their policy. Is it consistent with the Consumer Protection Act? Well, I've been trying to get a statement from the Consumer Goods and Services Ombudsman. I didn't get much joy there. Then the National Consumer Commission told me yesterday, and I'm looking at their statement, that they're still engaging with relevant stakeholders, that would be Comair and the Civil Aviation Authority, because they have to do that if there's another regulator in the industry concerned, which is the case here. And they said they have to do that when it, being the National Consumer Commission, identifies practices that are inconsistent with the CPA. Okay, so that's a clue that, strictly speaking, you can't pay for something, be promised a service at a particular time in response for your payment, and then it doesn't happen, and they say, well, we're not giving your money back. We're going to decide entirely how we're going to handle this, and we've decided that giving you a credit for 6 months, is a fair resolution of this issue. Well, clearly, in anybody but Comair's minds, that's not fair, especially as so many people were then left, as you say, either to hire a car, which is expensive, or to book a ticket on another, competitor airline, and because those were mostly, snapping up the last seats available on those airlines, they were premium prices. So a world of pain for those people, and you can totally understand why they're not happy.
So as things stand, given just the lack of clarity as far as options and what can be done for people who feel aggrieved or hard done by Comair, is it fair to assume that many of them just have to accept that they'll have to kiss their money goodbye, those who'd booked during the period of the suspension?
Well, there is another option that bypasses the companies themselves and gets the banks to deal with the issue. It's a process called, or a consumer protection really, called chargeback. It's done internationally by credit card companies, MasterCard and Visa. And to cut a long story short, how it works is that your bank, you go to your bank, the one that issued your credit card, and you say, look, I didn't get what I paid for. I can prove it, and it's very easy to prove with all the media reports around the suspension of Comair for those 5 days. Here's what I paid. I didn't get my flight, and your bank goes to the supplier's bank, being Comair in this case, and you get your money back that way. It is a very successful protection as long as you paid with your credit card. So I would suggest those people that had tickets that they couldn't use in those 5 days do it that way.
Let's talk a bit about the voucher offer, because that hasn't been accepted by all, perhaps even not by most customers. How would it have worked, and why have people found it to be such a problem?
You're talking about vouchers that have been offered by
the Kulula voucher, yes. Yes,
they call it a credit in their travel bank, but it's essentially, a credit. That's just their internal policy, Temekile. So, they're saying, and it's valid for 6 months, which the CPA would also have a problem with. Prepaid vouchers would be, according to the Act, have to be valid for 3 years. 6 months is particularly prejudicial to those passengers. The other issue here that is really interesting is that Comair runs British Airways domestically, right, and Kulula. So those that were left stranded holding British Airways tickets have been told they can apply for a refund. It normally takes 6 to 8 weeks, but looking at longer in this case, but still a refund nevertheless. Whereas Kulula, same company, no refunds except this credit for 6 months. So I asked Comair, why the discrepancy? And they said, well, we operate British Airways under franchise from British Airways, UK based. And so we have to fall in with their compensation rules. They have something called booking with confidence, which under these circumstances entitles passengers to a refund. So very interesting, EU African passengers in these sort of situations legally have a lot more recourse, well, not legally in terms of the airline's own policies. And we in South Africa here, different policies apply, which is, I think, one of my big takeouts from this whole saga. Why the discrepancy? Why do South African passengers deserve less?
And you would wonder then why there would be this apparent lapse in consumer protection, right? Because airlines being grounded is not a new phenomenon. The world over, this has happened before. So in a country like South Africa, you'd wonder why then there isn't clear law as to what the steps should be when such a situation arises.
Yeah. You have Consumer Protection Act, and then you have various industries that kind of have their own interpretations of it. The same goes with the sulfate industry. I mean, the expiring of prepaid data and airtime is a case in point. It shouldn't expire for 3 years, but it does. And on your point that the grounding of airlines is not unique to South Africa, you might remember in late 2018, 2019, Comair, a much smaller airline, we're talking Comair, 40% of the domestic market, Comair, much smaller slice, but they were grounded. And the stories I was taking up at the time was not why weren't there any refunds, but why were they taking so long? So that airline chose to refund at great cost. So there's a precedent in this country where in Miami it might have taken too long. They said they had to investigate everything to make sure there wasn't fraud, to make sure people hadn't applied for chargeback and got their money back that way. So it took a while, but those people got their money back eventually. So yeah, I think Comair has definitely has a case to answer here.
Final question, how would you rate Comair's handling of what's unfolded in the days since Saturday, from when the initial crisis, the announcement was made of a temporary 24-hour suspension and then the indefinite suspension, and the lapses that people were saying they experienced in communication in particular?
Yeah, this is always a problem when there's a crisis. Very few companies are prepared for it. So you had a situation where people were arriving at the airport on Saturday and even checking in, I'm told, and only then discovering that their plane was going nowhere. So that notification was, in many cases, far too late. I'm presuming the Comair will argue that they had late notification. I'm not entirely sure of that timeline. But certainly from the point where the suspension was lifted and people were able then to obviously make use of their tickets, those whose tickets had at the end of those 5 days of grounding and now wanted to rebook rather than buy another ticket on another airline at much higher cost, we're told you have to phone our call center. And they couldn't get through because there was clearly a deluge of people trying to get through. And I feel they could have capacitated. They should have foreseen that and had not created a situation where people wanted to rebook but actually couldn't. So, yes, I think it could have certainly creating platforms and for their customers to communicate with them, and also how they communicated what was going on. I mean, they were quite good on social media, but not everybody's on social media. There needed to be a means of contacting people before they got to the airport, or certainly before they tried to check in to say, terribly sorry, but the flight's been grounded.
Wendy Knowler, consumer journalist, good to speak to you as always. Thank you for your time on this Friday.
Thank you.